The Evil in the Woods is a true scary story about a young Native American boy who has a frightening encounter while driving home one night. It is a real incident that happened to a user named Navajo Joe when he was just a child. It was a cold December night, and I was just a kid. The stack of firewood was nearing the bottom, and my grandmother knew it wouldn't last till morning. She asked my uncle to fetch some more from the mountains. My uncle took me with him, and we drove off in his pickup truck. He chopped the wood, and I stacked it as fast as I could. By the time we finished, the sun was setting and the bed of the pickup truck was half full. On the way home, the sun disappeared from the sky and it grew very dark. We were driving down a dirt road that led through the woods. I leaned my head against the window and watched the silhouettes of the trees race past as the stars twinkled above them. All of a sudden, I got the awful feeling that we were being watched. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and a chill ran down my spine. My uncle had a strange look on his face, and he was staring directly ahead. Just then, I heard a tap, tap, tap on the window behind me. I started to turn around, but my uncle suddenly shouted, "Don't." I completely froze. My heart started beating rapidly. My uncle put his foot down on the accelerator, and we began to speed up. It was the first time I had ever seen real fear on my uncle's face. I heard another tap, tap, tap on the window beside me. "Look at me," my uncle shouted. "Don't turn around. Keep looking at me." I didn't know what was going on. My mind was racing. All of a sudden, I felt the truck dip as if something heavy had landed in the back. My uncle sped up even more and started praying loudly in our native language. I wanted to cry. I wanted it to stop. Once again, I heard a tap, tap, tap on the window behind me. "Just keep looking at me and don't turn away," my uncle cried over and over. I could see he was on the verge of tears. He was driving faster and faster, pushing the engine to its limits. My heart was beating so rapidly, I thought it would leap out of my chest. It was getting harder for me to breathe. I shut my eyes as tight as I could and whispered a prayer. A minute or two passed, and then the truck dipped again. My uncle looked around and let out a deep sigh of relief. He slowed down, and everything was quiet again. All I could hear was the drone of the truck's engine and the crunch of the gravel on the dirt road. My uncle looked at me and said, "We will have your father do a prayer in the morning so the evil will forget our faces." I remember curling up on the seat and just staring at the clock on the dashboard as I listened to my uncle sing an old prayer. By the time we got back to my grandmother's house, I was almost asleep. My uncle carried me inside and put me to bed. To this day, my uncle has never talked about what happened that night. Willowbrook State School is a scary place in Staten Island, New York. Many years ago, it was an institution for children with mental disabilities. However, it was overcrowded, filthy, and many of the patients were abused. Eventually, it was closed down and the place was abandoned today. The dilapidated buildings are said to be haunted by the ghosts of the children who died there. Willowbrook State School began as a hospital for mentally handicapped children. The school had a terrible reputation and was used like a warehouse where mentally disabled children were dumped. However, the school quickly became overcrowded and the employees were able to control the patients. The mentally disabled children were locked in rooms for extended lengths of time and forced to sleep on floors covered in their own pee and poop. Many of the children were malnourished and underfed. Most of them ran through the halls dressed in ragged clothes or completely naked. Conditions became so bad that a lot of children contracted diseases and died from illness and malnutrition. Unable to deal with the situation, some staff members began abusing the children physically. Some of the kids even wandered away from the institution and ended up dying in the surrounding woods. Between 1963 till 1966, secret medical studies were even conducted on the children. Doctors infected them with hepatitis in order to study the disease. They were being used as human guinea pigs. When Senator Robert Kennedy visited the mental institution in 1966, he called it a snake pit and declared that Willowbrook State School was not fit for even animals to live in. He said that the patients were living in filth and dirt, their clothing in rags, and rooms less comfortable and cheerful than the cages in which we put animals in a zoo. In 1971, funding to Willowbrook State School was cut drastically, which led to worse conditions. Local newspapers and TV stations began doing reports on the overcrowding, the unsanitary conditions, and the physical and mental abuse of the disabled children. In 1972, reporter Geraldo Rivera secretly gained access to Willowbrook State School using a stolen key and managed to document the brutal and horrific living conditions with a camera crew. His report led to an immediate government inquiry, and lawsuits were filed against New York State. By the mid-1980s, Willowbrook State School closed down and many of its buildings were abandoned today. They lie vacant and in ruins, littered with old toys, lunch trays, and broken beds. Sometimes, people claimed to hear disembodied footsteps echo in the deserted corridors. Others have heard whispered voices calling out their names and the eerie sound of children giggling in the hallways. One employee saw the ghostly figures of two children lurking in the building. The boy and girl were dressed in ragged clothing. The woman was puzzled because she could not figure out what the children were doing there. She followed them and watched as they turned the corner, disappearing from sight. When she peeked around the corner and saw that there was nothing there but an empty hallway, she realized she had just seen the ghosts. Teenagers who trespass on the property often tell tales of shadowy figures chasing them away from the buildings. Two boys went exploring in the school at night. They were chased around the grounds by a dark figure. Eventually, they managed to run back to their house. When they looked out the window, they realized a shadowy figure had followed them home and was standing in their garden. They watched it from their window as the thing stood in front of their home until the sun came up. In July 1987, the body of a young girl was discovered in a shallow grave on the grounds of Willowbrook State School. She had disappeared from her home a few days before. When police investigated, they found a homeless man named Andre Wren living in a makeshift shack nearby years before. He had been working as an orderly in Willowbrook. Witnesses reported seeing Wren playing with the missing girl. On the day she disappeared, police charged him with kidnapping and murder. He is a suspect in the disappearance of many other children in the area, but the police have been unable to prove it. Newspapers call him the Hannibal Lecter of Staten Island.